Look, there's no need, it really is up to you. We will proceed directly with questioning because we are familiar with not just your submission, but your experience. And as I said to Ms Pearson before her appearance, it's in no small part because of your experience that we're even having this inquiry in the first place. So without taking us through the full gory history of that long saga, can you just tell us, what is it about the experience that you had as a student at UQ that troubles you the most and that should be of concern and focus to the committee?
I think the most troubling part about my experience was the kind of stifling effect it has had on free speech at our universities, especially when it comes to these sensitive topics such as human rights in Hong Kong, human rights in East Turkestan regarding the Uyghurs. Because I think there are so many students at the University of Queensland and other universities, and just in my own personal experience, speaking with other students, so many students who, were supportive of the protests. And this even extends to students from mainland China as well, who I was approached by them on campus multiple times. I was told, we really support what you're doing, we really support your protests for democracy, but we can't be seen even standing or talking to you because the Chinese Student Scholar Association monitors and keeps tabs on the politics of all Chinese students. And just when it comes to, say, domestic students, there were many domestic students who, again, in my own anecdotal experience, supported the protests, told me such, but said to my face, I'm not going to be protesting alongside you because I don't want to lose a job, I don't want to have my career destroyed. I want a job with the university one day, so I have to watch what I say, that sort of thing. And as well, you have students, and I think this was touched on by the recent witnesses for Human Rights Watch. We have students with family in mainland China, and these students are very, very vulnerable. And there are multiple instances where students' families have been visited and threatened by Chinese state security members as a consequence of protesting either at the University of Queensland or other universities across Australia. So there's a huge problem when it comes to stifling free speech in this country. I think the fact that no one at the University of Queensland has ever been held account for what happened to me shows that they're almost, they see themselves above the law, they act with impunity. They believe that they don't have to follow the laws of this country. That was my experience at the University of Queensland with how the Vice-Chancellor and the Chancellor and the university administrations more broadly treated me with the investigation they begun into me opened on spurious grounds, and this investigation against me launched for political purposes. There are huge, huge problems with procedural irregularities, procedural fairness, my right to a fair trial at the University of Queensland when I was accused of these matters. There's a huge problem, I think. I think we're seeing a chilling effect across Australia for students. So many cases where students with family members in China, they cannot speak because they feel that the Chinese Communist Party can reach them even here. And students from Australia who feel that they can't speak about these issues on Australian campuses, oftentimes actually because of what I experienced, being assaulted on campus and basically being dragged through the mud for 2 years by my university, subjected to basically kangaroo court trials, the subject of fake charges. I've got my lawyer, Tony Morris QC, here today, and one thing he noted during the UQ proceedings against me was that at least some of the charges that they levelled against me were fabricated. The university had said that students had complained about my conduct, and then the students in question ultimately came forward and said, "We have never complained about Drew Pavlou. He's a friend of ours. We don't want the university to be doing this to him." And so what that shows is that the university was basically just trawling through all my social media, trawling for things to go after me with. These were fabricated charges. there was an investigation in search of a crime. And students across Australia see that and they wonder, is it really worth it to speak out? We've got a regime that has 3 million Muslims in concentration camps, and apparently we're not able to discuss this without fear in Australia. Students on university campuses cannot discuss this reality without fear that the university will go after them, that their employment will one day be threatened, that they may be subject to the same kinds of things I was subject to, being named by the being named by a spokesperson by the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, being named and attacked in Chinese state media, which encouraged my expulsion, and possibly, facing violent attacks, which I suffered multiple times. It wasn't just July 24, 2019, that first rally where I was assaulted. There were times on campus, months after that, when I was campaigning in student elections, and I was physically accosted, assaulted. When I was elected to the UQ Senate, Chinese students ripped down the Hong Kong Lenin Wall on campus and put up a photo of me that said, "This is what happens when you insult Chinese." There's a whole pattern and there's a whole range of intimidation going on here, and there's a huge chilling effect, because for most people they just think, would I want to go through this? And the answer is just no. And so it's easier to just silence yourself.
So, Ms. Pavlou, you might have seen recently that the former Vice-Chancellor at the University of Queensland, Professor Hoy, who's gone to a new job at the University of Adelaide, gave an interview to the Australian newspaper, which was covered prominently on the front page, about how he's learned so much from his experience at UQ and is kind of a convert to the dangers posed by China's Communist Party interference in our universities, and that he'll bring this new experience and wisdom with him to Adelaide, to the University of Adelaide. Given that obviously he's taken some time out to reflect on that, has he or any other representative from the university ever contacted you to apologise or offer any explanation for why you were treated the way you were?
Never once. I'm really glad that the Vice-Chancellor Peter Hoy was able to learn so much from that experience, the experience being dragging me through the mud for 2 years, basically bringing in 2 international law firms, possibly spending upwards of, we're talking millions of dollars possibly in Australian taxpayer funds, because they hired in 2 international law firms, Clayton Utz and Minter Ellison, that are high-tier law firms. They had partners at these law firms. And they used these law firms to go after me. So I'm very, very glad that Vice-Chancellor Peter Hoy has been able to learn so much from that experience. Unfortunately, that had to come at my expense. And to this day, not a single person has ever apologised to me from the University of Queensland. I have made statements to the effect... I've made previous statements, and I would repeat it here, that if I were to get a full unreserved apology and an admission that I was targeted for political purposes and this was wrong, then I would drop my $3.5 million Supreme Court action that very second, because it's not about the money for me. I just basically want justice. But no, never once been contacted. In fact, the new Vice-Chancellor, Deborah Terry, took the time out of her busy schedule to write to the Intelligence Committee to say that I had basically lied to the Intelligence Committee in my submissions. Well, I'm more than happy, and I'm testifying under oath right now, I'm more than happy for people to go through that with a fine-tooth comb, because everything I've ever stated about my experience with the University of Queensland, I've just been repeating my direct experiences.
You mentioned the investigation into you and the fact that 2 top-tier law firms were hired to assist the university with that investigation, and we don't yet know how much money that the university spent on that, which is derived from student fees and taxpayers, but I look forward to hearing from the university about that. To your knowledge, what efforts did the university undertake to engage in investigation of the students who appeared to assault you at that rally? I've seen the videos from that rally. It's pretty clear that you were assaulted and that the people are visible in it. I don't know how easy it would be to identify them, but how many law firms did they hire to pursue those students? What efforts did they make to track those students down, and how successful have they been?
To my knowledge, they never contracted in any law firms. So let's just look at the discrepancy between how the University of Queensland treated me and how the University of Queensland treated men who came onto campus, possibly were not students. They were there with the sole intention of shutting down a peaceful protest with violence and physically assaulted multiple people, in fact, even biting a security guard. How did the University of Queensland respond to that violence on campus? Well, it was related to me by the UQ Union president at the time, Georgia Milroy. She related to me that Deputy Vice-Chancellor Joanne Wright suggested that there be a multicultural barbecue held to kind of lessen the tensions on campus. So I'm not sure if the men in the skeleton teeth mask who assaulted me, punched me in the back of the head while my back was turned, bit a security guard. I don't know whether they would be invited to the multicultural barbecue. I guess that's up for grabs. The University of Queensland started an investigation into me that Freedom of Information records have shown that just over a 3-month period produced over 15,000 pages worth of documents on me. That's a 3-month period. Now, my first protest was July 24, 2019, so it's now been almost 2 years. I truly wonder what the true number of pages worth of documents on me exist in the University of Queensland. It would have to be tens of thousands, because if in just 3 months they could produce 15,000 pages worth of documents on me, then that shows just how intense this level of surveillance against me was, just how intense their campaign against me was. Now, UQ was never able to identify any of the men who assaulted me. They didn't report them to the police. They didn't really make any inquiries. My understanding is they circulated pictures of them around the faculties, and after months of investigating, they've never once been identified. Later, Queensland Police, after the Honourable Bob Katter MP made representations in Parliament, they charged one man who assaulted me, who had assaulted me by punching me in the back of the head while my back was turned on the day, a coward punch. They charged him, but he had already gone back to mainland China. My understanding, very soon after the protests, they were not able to tell me whether he was a student, and they would not tell me his name because apparently that was all confidential proceedings. But they did. Thank God, they did let me know that if he ever were to come back to Australia, he'd be arrested at the airport. I'm not sure Mr. Skeleton Teeth Mask is really planning any Australian holidays soon, because it seems that he was there, very likely, in my belief, at the direction of Chinese consular officials, and he was there with the intention of sowing violence.
Yeah, you mentioned consular officials. The Chinese Communist Party's Consul General in Brisbane has been historically an honorary professor at the university. Following these events at campus, he's made a series of public statements encouraging and congratulating Chinese students for standing up for China on campus. The comments were so inappropriate that the foreign minister publicly rebuked him, which is a highly unusual thing to do. What action did the university take against him?
And it's also my understanding that the United States ambassador to Australia also condemned those comments because they were very highly irregular. He was congratulating the self-motivated patriotism of the Chinese students who assaulted me on that day. You look at the level of violence that occurred that day. There were security guards bitten. There were Hong Konger girls who had their dresses ripped. There were Hong Kongers who were choke slammed to the ground. I was punched in the back of the head while my back was turned, coward punched. I was punched in the ribs. I was thrown to the ground. Other Australians were assaulted. And he was congratulating the Chinese students on their self-motivated patriotism against the separatists. My understanding is that separatism is a capital offence in China that merits the death penalty. And after he made those statements, I received dozens of death threats, hundreds of abusive messages across all my social media accounts. Abusive messages that threatened to kill me, threatened to hire hitmen on the dark web to kill me, murder my family, rape my mother in front of me, and then murder us both. Vile comments. And it's my understanding that as we speak right now, it's been almost 2 years since that first day. Consul General Zhu Jie is still an honorary professor at the University of Queensland, which is quite something, because the only person who has ever been subject to disciplinary action at the University of Queensland in relation to any of the violence that occurred at that protest was me. and I was the person who was assaulted.
It is fairly remarkable that someone who has the status of an honorary professor at the university who openly incited violence against university students has not been reprimanded by the university in any way and remains in that position.
I would like to quickly note, I believe Chancellor Peter Varghese, after about 11 months of pressure and being questioned by journalists for 11 months, he was willing to make the admission that, the comments where he actually endorsed violence against our students may be a little bit bad. So that was a really brave intervention by Chancellor Peter Varghese, which I really am very thankful for. Yes.
Mr. Pavlou, I'm not sure Hansard will record your sarcasm, so let me note it for the record.
Yes.
I could go on for some time, no doubt, but I will refer to some of my other colleagues first to see if they have